Go Vince.
Hello everyone, I am Bence Bernát from Hungary. I am a professional chess player and a nurtr Foundation coach and also a chess streamer. I will be moderating today's session. Good morning, good afternoon, and very good evening to all the new and old nurtr subscribers joining from different parts of the world. Thank you for being here with us today. And now we welcome Grandmaster Davor on his live camp complex Rook Endgames and Rook activity. For the new subscribers on the platform, I would tell a few words about Davor. So Davor Rogic is a Grandmaster from Croatia. He's been playing chess almost 40 years now. He achieved his Grandmaster title in 2005 with a peak ELO rating of 26-2. He has been a Croatian champion, a member of the Croatian team at the Olympic Games, and also a European champion, and also a European Championship. He has a very good knowledge of E4 openings with white, and also with black, d5 and e5. And he also played this throughout his career. And also Davor is an electronic engineer and has a full-time job as a computer scientist in a multinational bank. So now I will explain some do's and don'ts. So first, use the chat box for answering and use the Q&A box to ask questions. Also, please avoid spamming the chat and avoid repeating the same questions. And if you are unable to log in, what should you do? Please bear with us. You will be able to enjoy the chess content from the masters very soon with the link. You can join. And of course, coming up next, the next live camp is playing against a bishop pair on the 18th of March with the mentor Grandmaster Boris of Rook. And there's the coupon code. Thank you. So welcome, Grandmaster Davor. How are you?
Hello, Bence. Hello to everyone. Nice to meet you again on our Endgames complex Endgames session. And I'm quite well. In Croatia today is nice weather and it's always okay. So I hope that you like the previous Endgames complex Endgames session, and today we will discuss more about the Rook Endgames, and about the Rook we will see that how important is actually the Rook activity in the Rook Endgame. So give me a moment, please, just to start with one basic position. We will see first basic position, and of course during the lesson you can ask your questions and your opinion. So I must tell you that probably everybody of yours know very well that the Rook is the most important when he occupied the line. But if you occupy just the line, it's not means that it is you are winning immediately, and this is absolutely the advantage. And why the Rook should occupy the line? Let's say one basic position like here, which I'm pretty sure that everybody of yours know very well what is the first move for white and what will be the first move for black. Obviously, look at this. White Rook control the A line, and absolutely the first move is a Rook E7. That's absolutely logical and clear. So if white is on the move, he will be playing Rook E7. And let's say if black is on the move, he will stop the Rook E7, and with the move something like king f7, and then white control of the E line is not so important. So the first lesson, actually, we see that when we have the open file, the control of open file or line is not so important if you cannot go to the enemy camp. So let's see if white is on the move. The rook to e7 is immediately activate, and look at this. Black must protect his pawn and passivize the black pieces. So do you see now the rook on the 7th rank, like here? He cannot take any pawns, any materials on 7th rank. But what is the main duty of this rook on the 7th rank? With attack on the g7 and with attack on the b7, he make passive the rook and the king. This black rook and black king are passive, in a passive position, and black cannot organize any active activity, any active approach. So the first duty with the rook on the 7th rank is actually to push black pieces to passive position. And this is a maximum activity of white rook. Let's see now what can be the plan for the rest of this endgame, how to help, because the rook alone, now he cannot win against the black pieces, black defense. So he needs help. And the help will become with his king, let's say, because now the king can come to the game. Do you see? So let's see, first, improve the position of the king. And the worst situation for black is that because he's desperately passive, let's say, after king f8, of course, white will stay on the 7th rank. And look at this now. We see the position that black cannot move a rook or the king to not lose the material. And white stopped any realistic contraplay, just with his rook on the 7th rank. There is any realistic contraplay for black. And unfortunately for black, he can just wait. And white rook king is coming to the, let's say, to the f8. White improve his king. And may I ask you now, what do you think? How you will play here? So the king will be very nice if king can go to the move like king g6 or something like that, but these squares are very well controlled with the pawns. Yes, some of yours. Yes, rook e7 don't do so much, and king e6. I'm agree with you that king e6 is looks good, but look at this. Try to avoid the move like a king e6, not because they are wrong here, but because after rook e8 with check and king d7, you are unnecessary give the black the opportunity for counterattack, and this is basically wrong. Don't allow your opponent ever counterattack. Look at this. Now it's okay. White is still winning, but probably some problems can be arose in this position. So is it possible for white to organize not to play king e6 and to allow king e6, allow the black some kind of contraplay? Don't allow any kind of contraplay. And is it possible to play this position to don't allow any contraplay for black? Do you have some idea how to make a weakness in, let's say, in this fourthness on the, yeah, bravo, Arun, that's the good way. And what is the plan for h4? Exactly, h4, that's the way, that's the way. Look at this. If white start to push the h4 to h5 to h6, yes, bravo. That's the idea. How white will destroy the black camp without any contraplay for him. So it's quite clear. Look at this. If you play h4 And black doesn't have any contraplay here, realistic, because if he start to go with the rook, then he immediately lost a lot of material immediately. This is a huge material deficit immediately. So black can just wait, and white execute his plan with h5. And look at this small pawn, h pawn. He comes to the black camp and provoke the weakness. If black stop him, then of course you see what is the next move now. If black stop it, no, g4, king g6, exactly, king g6, and not only the g7 pawn is lost, but also the king is in a big problem. So here black decided to wait, king g8, and now the plan is white go to execute finally his plan with h6. There is nothing better than to take the pawn, and white take the pawn. So now white transformed this endgame, but look at this transformation. The rook has another colleague as a king, and also there is a very nice pass pawn for white who just going forward, and black doesn't have any. Now the contraplay can be very easily stopped. The rook is 7 because the rook and the pawn endgames after rook is 7, king is 7 is easily lost for. This is easily lost for black. So after check, now the black pawn on b7 is hanging, by the way, and if black give a check, white cover the check, of course, and offer the pawn endgames. And for black this is unacceptable. He must go to defense. And like here, the rest is not so difficult here. Do you maybe have some idea how to play the rest? Usually in the endgames, exactly. Not king d6, not so much king d6, but the Davor, this was offer the f5. Yes, yes, exactly. The f5 with the f6 is the easiest way. Just usually in the endgame, when you have a pass pawn, the best advice is to push your pawn forward, because pass pawn becomes danger when you push. Okay, and now after f6, let's say the best move here will be well, f7, then the king comes to the f8, and you will face some issue. One of the best method in rook endgames is a cut off the king. Cut off the king. When the king is cut off, like here, look at this. How you can cut off the king? Exactly, rook g7. Exactly, we play rook g7, and then black can choose. If you go to f8, of course, then it's cost at least 1 or 2 pawns. So, and also the rook is hanging, by the way. So, and if black go to h8, what now is the move? White. Well, king e7 is absolutely acceptable, I agree. Or let's say the rook g4, with one of the best advice in all rook endgames is the cut of the king. Look at this. And one of the basics in the rook endgames said that the king and the pawn, the king is so strong that the rook usually cannot stop the promotion king and the pawn like here. Look at this. Without the king, black simply cannot control the rook and the pawn. So black can play something like this, check, and king e7, and of course then pawn is go promote and all is over. So look at this basic example. The basic example is the activity of the rook. White rook go to 7th rank, and his main activity actually is that he forced, or let's say frozen, the rook and the king and don't give any activity of them. The rook alone cannot win on the 7th rank, but in some way, strategically, he frozen the king and the rook, and black activity is absolutely stopped. And then look at that. White have all the time on the world to come with his king. And then Arun also suggests very nicely that h4, h5 go to the black complex. And all of these show us how the black in passive defense is without any chance. Without any chance. So we see here that how the rook activity that is still white doesn't have huge material advantage, but he's strategically much better. And with the passed pawn, how will he push the passed pawn and cut off the king? This rook now, the new job for this rook is to cut off the black king, and white king and the pawn easily outplayed the rook and bring the wind to the white side. Okay. So my advice, always go with the rook on the 7th rank like here, because rook on the 7th rank is not just to take the pawns, but also he pacifies the opponent army. Let's see now another very famous, maybe some of yours know it. White was Jose Raul Capablanca, the world champion number 3 from Cuba. And he is very famous about, he became the world champion because 100 years, approximately. And he was very famous about his positional, nice positional style and very good endgame playing. And from my side, I can strongly advise to you to study the games from Jose Raul Capablanca, because you will improve significantly your positional knowledge. Here, the white is on the move. And can you look a little bit? White already has the rook on the 7th rank. We saw it. But black looks like has a very good contraplay, because his rook attacking the pawn on c3, and all white pawns are quite weak. And do you see maybe how to play for white here? What the great Cuban find here, how to play with white. I see the Rishit suggests g6, but I can say the g6 is not so good move. G6 is not so good because there is one true that after rook takes c3, the king must step back, and now the white king also is without action. And I must tell you that the rook and the pawn cannot promote, the pawn and the rook cannot promote the pawn against the king, never. And only some exceptionally in some not typical endgame, but so this leads white to nowhere. And Ayan suggests something more logical. Exactly, I'm agree. The king g3, that's the way. King g3 is the way, and when black takes, king h4. So that's the way. Look at this. White give up the pawn, and even not only one, he give up the 2 pawns. Rook comes to f3. So what to play now? Okay, now the king h5. Yes, Arun suggests very good move. Look at this. King h5 is also a good idea, but even quicker of king h5 is if you play the g6 exactly. If you play the g6 move, yes, the g6 allow white when he take on f4 that now the king can go to the g5 with tempo. King go to g5, attack the rook, and look at now the position. If rook takes on d4, what happened now? Do you see maybe? Very logical move for white. Now. Yes, exactly. King go to f6. And try to memorize this position. When you have the rook on the 7th rank and the king and the pawn to help, look at this. White is at 3 pawns down, but he's completely winning. Because the black king in a desperate position. White, rook, king and the pawn, they build up the mating nets. And not only the mating nets, also if king escape, white can take, but also I can promote the pawn with check, g7, and he easily promote. And the rook doesn't have any problems to collect all these pawns and the king. So if I go a little bit back, yeah, we see that after king h4, he play rook f3, g6, take, and now black realized that if he collect the more pawns, he will be immediately lost. So he decided to play rook e4. And his idea was after king, so the king f6. Black idea was just to play rook g8. Okay, pardon, please, king g8. And now the Capablanca is really, really nice positional player. And he recognized that, of course, he saw that he can take the pawn on c7 with the rook, and he do it. But before to take the pawn, he make one very useful intermediate move. Do you see which one can be this very nice intermediate move? Not rook f7, because rook f7 doesn't threaten anything. King f5 is also not so nice, because then black can take, of course. King f5 is not so nice because black can take. Yes, rook c7 is okay, but even before he take the rook c7, yes, exactly. On g7, check on g7 is the good one. Check on g7 just to push, just to push the king on the square when white pawn can give him a check. Look at this small situation when a great grandmaster exploit the fact that he can push the king to be on the check for the pawn. Look at this, he just give a check and only then take the pawn. By the way, he has the same threat, rook c8 is a mate. And only defense for black is obvious. I'm pretty sure that you see the defense. The defense is a rook to e8. Yes. And now in such a position, I know that everybody of yours, yes, you suggest the rook f7, but after king f7, pardon please, here. But I want to say to you, don't allow any contraplay to your opponent. Because if you play rook king f7 or rook a7 also, you give some kind of contraplay to your opponent, even if you take. Yes, exactly. Because only the f5, if you take, white is still winning. But then this f pawn starts to run and can be a little bit annoying for white, because creating some contraplay. So, and here when all black forces are passivized, king f7, rook g8, king f7, rook g8, and or even rook d8 is possible, let's say. King f7, even rook d8 is possible, and g7 you cannot make the way to promote the pawn, and no, rook c1, but still it's tricky. But why to allow black any contraplay? Why? Because you suggest very good move is a king f5. take the pawn, eliminate the last activity of black. And when black play rook e4, how to squeeze again the black king? Because look at this, black always has the problem with his king. Because white cut off him very strongly on the 7th rank. And that's the problem for black. Exactly, but first I don't take the pawn. I will play immediately king f6 here. Look at this, after king f6, white threat a mate in one move. And black give a check. So how to play now with white? Well, king g5, but then king g5, black will take the pawn on d4. This is, let's say, exactly. Yes, king e5, correct, king e5, attack the pawn, and attack the rook, by the way. And look at this, when rook attacks the pawn on g6, now the Capablanca use his move, exactly, use his brilliant tempo few moves ago, and he can push the pawn with tempo. Look at this. This is a really brilliant way of world champion from Cuba. He'll give a check with g7. And of course, black cannot take the pawn because the pawn endgame is simply lost for him. So after g7, he must go to g8, but now the white just collect the pawn on a7, and black cannot hold and protect his pawns. And now it's a funny position that after, look at this, in the starting position, black has the 2 pawns up, and now he finished in a 2 pawns down. All of this because the activity. And now look at it. Again, we saw the situation. Look at this. Many of my students don't accept it that the pawn will promote always with the help of king, not with the help of rook. With the help of king, the pawn is promoted. So this is even now. One more time, I will show you this endgame. So let's say here, from this position, white rook is on active position, and looks that his black rook is also active, but after he takes the pawn, king goes, and white don't afraid to give up 2 pawns for 2 pawns. Okay, this was the funny that now black is at 2 pawns up, and we will see that after few moves, 6 or 7 moves, white will be the one who is 2 pawn up. From 2 pawn down, like here, mate is threat. It's a check on g7, take on c7, and now after king f5, we saw that g7 is a very good tempo, and look at this move by move now. After just a few moves, I think 8 moves, and white is at 2 pawns up and easily convert his huge advantage in material and in position. Okay, and now one situation, I will show you how the rook can be always go for rook activity. Believe me, the rook activity is always the only hope how you can survive, even in the most difficult way. Look at here. Look at position. White is on the move, and this is the game from 2 Soviet Grandmaster or Bukhov play against Ibrahimov. White is on the move. White is on the move, and black has a strong pawn up, and actually this is the pawn on very good. This is the best constellation. What can you have in the rook Endgames. So that means pawn. The rook is behind the pawn and he gives the support to pawn. And this pawn is a very strong one who just push forward and looks unstoppable. May I ask you now, what do you think? How to play this position? White is on the move. Rook h1, yes. Because this looks like only way how to stop the pawn. Because the king cannot stop the pawn. Yes, but the arm think that the rook to b1 looks better. Rook to h1. So anybody else? Do you have some ideas? King g4 doesn't help because it's rook to b1. Okay. So yes, so many of yours go to the rook to b1. Yes, and it's easy. Yeah, but unfortunately, I can say that the king e4 with king d5 simply doesn't work because white doesn't have a time, because after this, look at that. And then h2 and pawn almost is winning. And now look at this, the rook is in a completely passive position. And let's say the black can play just simply the rook to 6 rank and white is in some kind of zugzwang, or white is completely lost. In the game, I must tell you that even the GM sometimes don't know how to do it. And actually, the GM Obuchov didn't see the whole concept. He knows that after rook h1, he go to passive position to stop the pawn. And of course, pawns start to run. He stopped him maximum what he can. He stopped him, but after h6, in the game was king g4. And now white take the pawn, but this, of course, he overlooked the simply take. And do you see now how black play and win? It's not difficult. Yes, d5, bravo. And simply the pawn is white resigned here. Exactly, d5 and white resigned. But look at this, white go to the passive position, pardon, please. White go to passive position and black just push his pawn and just make a zugzwang for him. And white must go to the passive position and he cannot do nothing. If he play with the king, the black king is coming here, of course. And yes, and if he must take, if he play with the rook, nothing. And if he take, then it's just simply lost after d5. But white can play better, and some of yours suggest the rook b1 as a better move. But it's a quite complex, and I'm not blaming the Grandmaster Obuchov that he didn't see it during the game, because it's a quite complex. So what to do if like push the pawn h3? Rook b7, yes, I'm agree. That's only logical. And where now there is only one good square for black. Can you tell me what is the only king f8 is the only one? Yes, because the king f8 is the only move. The king e8 is obviously lost. King e8 is obviously lost because of rook give a check and take the rook, of course. And king g8, do you see why it's not so good move? Exactly, king g6 and king is in the mate. Okay, but black play king f8, and now one superstar move. Can you look this position? Maybe some of yours find this move, and thus white play and make a draw. And it's not easy, I can tell you. And I can tell you that king g6, yes, the king g6, rook g8, king f6 looks tempting. Yes, I'm agree with you. But after king g6, black don't play this and black don't play this and this. This is absolutely clear. But after king g6, there is a one very strong move for black. How to win here? Yes, bravo, bravo. Rook h4, exactly. Rook h4, and now white is in a lost position. He cannot do nothing. He, let's say, push his pawn, but black is very quickly in queening. And even here, in our last session, I tell you that who first promote, he is winning. So here the white is first promote and black first promote and he's winning. Yes, we did it, topic, bravo. Yes, we did it. And so king g6, unfortunately for white, king g6 is not a solution here. So we saw king g6 is a rook h4 and white is lost. So what is the move then? Arun suggests king g5. Let's see, and king e6 also doesn't work. Yes, bravo. Srinivas also say king g5. Exactly, bravo. And that's the hidden and very fantastic move. Is a king g5 in this position. Look at this. Why king g5? Now the threat, the threat is set to play with the rook to the b8 and b7 and checking the black king. So after h2, by the way, the rook g8 is a big mistake because now the king f6 is even winning position because it's a mate. And if we play h2, then it's a perpetual check because after check, black king cannot find any better way, and this is a draw. He must go back, and the position is simply drawish. So look at this, even in the worst position like this one, when looks the desperate position, when looks that black pawn is going forward, unstoppable, the best way was to activate your rook and then give a check, and then with the stud-like move, what probably Grandmaster Obukov didn't see during the game, that the king g5 was the way to set up the active position of the rook leads to the draw. Okay, and finally, I will show you one very famous position from the Salo floor and Vidmar, Milan. Oh, I'm sorry. Salo floor was a white, Vidmar was a black. Look at this. The material is equal. Look at the position, please, a little bit. White is on the move. Material is equal, but white has absolutely the advantage here because he controlled the c5 and d4, and the first move is absolutely logical and acceptable. This is a centralization of the king. So white play king e2, and after king e7, white go with the rook king to d3, and after king d6, now the move king d4 is not so good. Yeah, king d4 is a classic, but unfortunately yes, rook a5 was a better, because king d4 is not so good, because rook b8 can come, and then the c5 is the hidden move, and look at this. The c pawn cannot be taken because of rook b4, and so white must go, and this is absolutely equal now. So to keep the c5 square here, after king d6, white must play rook to a5 to attack the pawn. Firstly this, And black say, okay, you attack the pawn, I must protect you. And now white go to d4. So white control the c5 and a5. Black cannot move the pawns, but okay, black push the f5 pawns. And white, do you have suggestion now how to squeeze more the black? Exactly, a3 and b4, very well. b4, squeeze him, black play rook b8, white play a3, and black now go to the rook to e8 to passive position. And black think that he will see, yeah, and if he doesn't, it's not, rook b6 also is nothing better because white can play then again the e4, let's say, like in the game. And the b6 is even worse place, bro. Rook b6 is not helpful too. He play rook a8, and black decided to keep his rook passive, and white play e4. Black takes, and he play rook a7. Black don't afraid, he thinks his king cover the weakness and how white will win this. But there is a one plan for white. Maybe some of yours can find the plan. And this is the plan actually. Yes, bravo. King f4 and king come to the h6. King creating, yes, and go to the second, to the and going to the king side and make second weakness. Exactly. So let's say if he play king f4, and if black stay passive, white can go with simply with the king to h6, play g4, and now his plan is to play h4, h5. Look at this, for example. h4, h5, takes, and the rest is quite easy because it's if you play with the king, g7, rook g7, and exactly rook g5, rook g7, and it's winning. Look at this. When black stay passive like here, rook a7, king comes, and okay, and if he stay passive, then the pawns again comes like in the example number 1, the pawns just come and make a weakness, and finally we saw that the rook comes to the here, or even there is another route. Also the rook can go even g5, g8, and take the pawn. The pawn is lost. To avoid this, in the game after rook king e4, black play h6. But one more time, white, exactly, h5, h4, bravo, h5, h4, pardon, please, king g4, and h5. Provoke the weakness. And one more time we saw that after, if he takes, then king takes, and simply g4 is a desperate position for black because the pawns are gone. So black decided to play g5 and to not allow white king to come to his camp. Black think that he's keeping. And look at this, now it's a very interesting moment. Of course, white want to play after g5, white want to go with his king to e4, but maybe king f3 is, let's say, less accurate, because after check, look at this, now the black rook become active, so don't allow your opponent to become any activity. So very nice move by white is g3. Small move, because black doesn't have any contraplay and he must stay in the place. So he play rook a7, and only now king f3, and only now king e4. Okay. And black just stay passive with his rook. And now how to win this position? White start with the king d4, but black stop him, and white go back and black stop him. Okay, they repeat one. And like usually in such a type of endgame, the decision maneuver is actually with the rook to go to opponent camp. Some idea maybe? Bravo, bravo. Srinivas, bravo, bravo. Rook a5. Yes, rook a5 is a good move. Check. And he challenged the black. He challenged the black king where to go. Because if you go to the, let's say, to the f6, now the king is a one-way. It's a little bit far from pawn, so after king rook c5, rook c7, and then tempo another. And king go to the d4, and king comes to the c5, and all is over. So here in this position was the question. Also, Viresh suggested g4 with king d4 and then rook f5, which actually also looks logical for me too. But the rook f7 is a contraplay. Well, I can say that the best way was actually to rook e5. It's the clearest way. Because after king f6, we saw that rook c5 go for king d4 and king c5, and all is simply over because, let's say, this is absolutely clear. And after king rook e4 check, if king go to d6, now the rook comes to the e8. And rook, of course, looking for the h6. But also, after c5, one more time, white play very accurate move. After c5, he first give a check. Look at this. This is a good technique of the white player. He give a check and again challenged him. Because if you go with the king on e6, of course, pawn takes. And if you go on c6, then the check is coming and lost the pawn. So basically, look at this. King must go to the c7. But now the king come to the 7th rank. And after this move, the black faced the problem. Yes, white is very strong place, hollow floor. The rook h8, exactly. And after take, he give a check and calculate quite accurately that with accurate calculate this pawn endgame is simply lost for this pawn endgame was simply lost for, and black resign. So look at this, and I will tell you that here black go for passive defense, and with the passive defense of the rook, you almost always feel lost on this or that way. Look at this, king f4, and then h4, and white can do everything. It is all white have all time in the world because black is absolutely passive. And then finally white find, of course, nice finish and won this endgame. But look at this, and white won. But look at this endgame. This was, when the people analyze it, they find a way here. They find a way here, when even in the beginning, white go here, and somebody asked, is it possible? You know, then you must go to defense in the rook endgames to block the pawn, pass pawn, or to defend the weakness. Always do it with the king, because the king is the 4-unit value and the rook is the 5-unit. Rook is the most valuable pieces here. And look here. Here the black play careless rook b8 and go to passive defense, and then white play e4 and white won later. But the question is it possible maybe to play better with black? And the answer is yes. Yes, the main strategy was to activate rook at any cost. Activation of the rook at any cost. So the correct plan for black here was to play rook c7, surprising move. Go with the pardon, please, king c7, surprising move. Look at this. Of course, with idea king b6. Of course, white. Somebody can say white with ball king c5. And now king b7. Yes, king b7, protect. And now a white rook is a little bit misplaced. Okay, but the king is go to maximum activity. Look at this. Now the white king is in the maximum activity, but black rook start to contra-playing. Black rook start to contra-playing on e8. And that's the contra-play. Look at this. Rook activity at any cost. And now white, let's say, rook a3, and his idea is to play rook c3 and to stop activity. But now it's incredible how black can organize the activity. With g5, okay, let's say rook c3, somebody can ask, but then f4. Okay, somebody can tell, yes, white takes, black takes, and white takes the pawn. Look at this, white looks so strong and so better. But rook activity is the crucial. Look at this. Check. Rook behind the pawn. And now strong pass pawns start to run. So white must handle it somehow. Strong pass pawns start to run. And white go to defense. And another critical moment. Don't push the pawn now to d2, because then white will stop him and go with the king. But the move is the rook to g8. Another, and this endgame actually, black is the pawn down, but this endgame should be drawish, because after, let's say, rook d1, rook takes, and let's say check, rook takes another pawn, and this game, this is a drawish endgame now, arrows. So look at this, how in this position, which looks so desperate, king c7, rook king b5, and now activation of the rook, give black actually good contra chance, give g5, just to open, look at this, black fighting to open the e line, and after takes, black maintains enough contraplay. We saw this, and then d4, d3, and now black shift. Of course, he cannot promote the pawn. As I tell you, the rook cannot promote the pawn. The king is the one who promotes. So here, this is a waste of time. This is because d2 and rook d1, and now just can go back and take the pawn. But if he played, as I told you, after d3, if he played the rook g8, look at this. Now black has more than enough contraplay to take everything and to establish the drawish endgame. Finally, maybe someone can ask, but okay, instead of rook c3, maybe I can play instead of rook c3 here, maybe black can play g3, don't allow f4. But then another motive is here to g4. And if he takes, and after rook c3, the rook f8, and again, look at this, the activity of the rook, it's enough for draw. one more time, because the rook is so active that the draw is sure for him. And let's say even here, if you play f4, can be even worse for white, because after rook e4 and rook c4, and now the rook, look at this, how the dead rook from e8 now become more active than the white rook. Maybe black here is even sized the initiative. So look at this. This is a critical moment and very educated one. That don't go. Always allow your rook to be active. Look at this. Active rook with the pawns. Just try to activate him as much as possible. And look at this, how the rook activity can secure black draw. So this is all from my side for today. So maybe, Spencer, does we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Could you stop Sunshine, please?
Yes.
Okay. So question 1. Zay asks, in a 9-round tournament, how can you make sure that you are focused throughout the tournament? Because he and others tend to lose focus when losing 1 or 2 games.
Make me pardon, I'm not understand the question. What the question is?
To how to stay focused after losing 1 or 2 games at the start of the tournament.
Okay, this is a very, very bad situation when you start with the 1 or 2 lost on the tournament. And I must tell you, usually there is no good advice. The best is try to play every game like it's the first one. Don't think about the overall result. Don't think about anything. Just focus on the next game. Just about the next game, and you must be ready to fight always for everything, but one by one, game by game. Not think about I have 7 games, maybe I will score than this. So one by one. This is only psychological advice how to play after 1 or 2 lost.
Okay. So the next question is from Neha. Neha asks that how can we use the principle of 2 weaknesses in the context of Rook Endgames?
Well, like in all endgames, the 2 weaknesses allow us to change the focus of the game. So usually with 2 weaknesses, when your opponent cover 1, let's say with the king, then you change your attack on the second weakness, and usually there is no pieces to protect this second one. So this is we saw even in this example, let's say, and the h6 was the second weakness, how the rook go rook e5, rook e8, and the rook go to the second weakness very quick.
Okay, so next is from Vinita. Vinita asks that who is your favorite player of all time and why?
Well, it's this is let's say everybody of us have the favorite player, and this is a matter of how can I say, our private what we like, what we don't like. My favorite actually was the Garry Kasparov, because I was grow up together with him, because when I start to play chess, Kasparov start to go to the world championship, and then he played the famous match against the Karpov, and I followed him all my chess career. And for me, the Kasparov is really strong, really good, and he do a lot for the chess from many sides. And so my favorite is Kasparov.
Yes, I think many people agree with you on this.
Yes.
Rahul asks, how do I handle the time pressure and how to deal with the time pressure?
My advice to all my students, avoid it. Avoid the time pressure, because in time pressure, inside not everybody of us and almost all the players play much weaker than usual. So be concentrate during the game, play more quickly, more faster, make decision faster. Don't look every time to find the best move. And maybe the Karpov advice was here the good when he said, if I see the one good move, I'm not searching for the best or for the winning one. So be more practical during the game, because if you have a few minutes for many moves, then you are in a big trouble. And of course, when you are finally in a time pressure, you must calculate quickly. And good advice is be in a time pressure more strategic than tactical. Don't look for winning tactics, because everybody of us in the time pressure, we see some winning tactics, but look more strategical.
Okay, so fifth question. Do you have any suggestions on specific things that we should do to improve our tournament performance? And he says that he's a 1780 player and want to break the 2000 level in the next year.
My advice is to read the chess books, to see the chess materials, and also to use to take some of the coaches or some of the platforms to have to someone to help him, her or him to reduce the number of materials and how to work.
Okay, so sixth and last question. Brooke asks, when does one know that one can pursue chess professionally? So can be a professional player.
Make me pardon, I am not understand fully what professional chess player.
That someone can. When can you know that you can pursue a life of a professional chess player? So be a professional player.
Well, I don't know what to say to. Yeah, my way was that I go to the school and to the university, and I have parallel professional, and I was never a big professional player. Many of my colleagues go to all his life they study chess and they play chess professional, and this is a very nice profession. I can say it's very nice, but also very challenging, because I always tell everybody that if you are chess professional, you must work 8 hours per day on chess, because you are professional. So that means to be a chess professional, you must be ready to work every day 8 hours on chess.
Yes, that's true. I myself do this as well. So and of course you are on a higher ranks as well today. So definitely you are right.
Okay, so if it's all, I can.
Yes.
Okay, I can thanks for everyone too, and I will send also the materials will be ready for this. What we look now, you can find on the PGN format also on our platform. So yes. Thank you everyone, and see you next time. We will see the complex Rook complex endgame Rook endgames complex with the king activity. How the king activity is important. Okay, thanks everyone, and see you.
Thank you everyone. Bye.
Bye.